Welcome to our second Sharing Leading Practice event of this academic year. We are very excited to have Jenny and Lyndsey from Lancot Primary School with us today. Lancot is part of our Challenger Hub, which is in the Essex and Bedfordshire region. Jenny is the head of the school and Lyndsey is head of the SEMH unit. Before I hand over to Jenny and Lyndsey, who will be talking about their high quality provision for disadvantaged pupils, I just wanted to go over a few of our housekeeping rules. Thank you to those of you who have already introduced yourselves in the chat function. If you haven't done so already, please do so by saying what school you are from and if there is anything you'd particularly like to get out of the session. There will be time throughout the presentation for questions, and I believe Jenny and Lyndsey have also put in time at the end for a Q&A session. Please do put any thoughts or comments in the chat for the wider group as we go along. If you could please also remain muted during the presentation as it prevents any background noise, that would be greatly appreciated. If you do want to unmute yourself, however, just hover over the little microphone icon in the bottom left-hand corner. I suggest putting your screens on speaker view, which is found in the top right-hand corner if you haven't done so already. Towards the end of the session, I'll be posting a link to our feedback form, which would be great if you could please complete. Feedback is really valuable to us and helps guide future events. Finally, this session is going to be recorded, so if you do not want to feature, please do let me know. I will now stop sharing my screen and pass over to Jenny and Lyndsey. Thank you both so much for leading today's session.
Thank you, Rebecca. Right, I'm just putting it out there now. I'm not very techie, so I'm going to try my best with this one. Right, screen share. There we go. Has that worked?
Yes, it has.
Yay, first hurdle over. Hello, everybody. As Rebecca said, I'm Jenny Fraser. I'm head of school here at Lancot, and here's my colleague, Lyndsey Robertson-Forge. Just want to put it out there to start with. We're in the same teaching bubble, which is why we've decided to sit next to each other, so we're not breaking any of our regulations that we have in place here. Thank you very, very much for joining us today. As you know, we're going to be talking to you about our approaches to equity of provision. And as Rebecca said, it's something that's delivered and shared primarily by Lyndsey, who runs our SEMH unit, but equally it is very much a whole school approach. So even if you're in a school where there isn't such a unit, there is going to be a lot with great relevance to it for you, we hope. But before we jump into that, I've got a little warm-up task for you. We would like you, please, as much as we don't want you to necessarily use your phones for anything else because you're going to be so busy listening to us, to start with, we would like you to use your phones and ask you to message 5 people in your contact lists and ask them for 3 adjectives to describe you. So you can choose anybody. And the whole point to this is to kind of show the power of words and the power of perception and how actually this can really make you feel empowered as an individual, which links really closely to what we are going to be talking about today. So we appreciate that your phones might be going off as we go through, and please feel free to use the chat box if there's anything that you want to share from that part of the activity. So grab your phones, message those people in your contact lists and see what they've got to say. Whilst you're doing that, I'm going to, before I hand over to Lyndsey, I'm just going to give you a little bit of contextual information about Lancot, so you can kind of see that the journey that we've been on and where the importance of equity versus equality kind of fits into our journey. So Lancot Challenger Academy, we're a primary academy, a primary school based in Dunstable. We're average sized. We have below national figures for pupil premium and free school meals, and also for SEND, but within the SEND, the proportion of pupils with EHCPs is high. So for example, we were allocated funding for 8 EHCPs last year alone. We do have an SEMH unit on site, which caters for pupils with behavioural needs beyond what can be delivered through mainstream, and Lyndsey's going to tell you more about that. And we've had an interesting journey, certainly since I started. So I joined Lancot in 2014, and instantly I could tell that it was a place full of potential. It was somewhere full of really dedicated and very passionate people, but that wasn't necessarily transferring into the learning. So we wanted to explore kind of where the link was missing there, because learning wasn't necessarily exciting, teaching wasn't exciting, and that led to some passive learning with very low expectations generally. We were due an Ofsted inspection at that time, and myself and other SLT members, we knew instantly that it wasn't going to be a good outcome. However, we didn't realise just how bad an outcome it was going to be either. So when we were part of the no notice inspection schools, those group of 40 schools, so when Ofsted arrived, they described us as a school where pupils learn in spite of the teaching, which is possibly the most damning thing you could ever hear in an Ofsted inspection, and something that took us a while to fully comprehend. But ultimately we came out of that knowing that we needed some rapid improvement that would lead to change overall, including in kind of staff morale and well, everything basically. So we did part of that rapid improvement. We looked at changes in leadership and the structure. We obviously looked at changes in policy, but the biggest change that we focused on, that we thought was going to be our real driving point for that school improvement, was our change to our curriculum design. So we did a big overhaul of that, and we thought about our ethos and what we believed as teachers and what we wanted that vision to be, and then we designed a curriculum around that. So now we have a really well embedded creative curriculum, and it's one that is heavily based on learning for purpose. It's a very good balance, we believe, of character education with skills and knowledge. It's kind of all encompassing and holistic in that way. It provides real life experiences where all of that kind of skills and knowledge can be transferred and interleaved and shared, so that it does have that sense of purpose. As I said, it has a strong focus on character. So we're confident that we have children now that are leaving us as a primary to be secondary ready and actually ready for the wider world. As I said, we focus on a wide range of subjects and approaches, so it's not limited at all. So we've brought in things like outdoor education and enterprise and financial education into it. So we've widened what our curriculum looks like, so that depth and breadth is really there to lead to something really purposeful for the children. So that in itself, and embedding that curriculum, has been a journey, and over that journey, staff could really see the impact, not just the academic impact, but the significant impact on children as learners. And the staff became more and more on board with it, and the culture and the ethos of the school shifted, and it's now moulded into something that we're all really, really proud of. So that when we had our next Ofsted inspection, we came back in 2018, we came out significantly stronger, and we do put that down primarily to our curriculum design. We've also had 2 really successful quality assurance reviews, working with challenge partners, and both of which have included areas of excellence. The most recent one was deemed a leading school in all areas, and our area of excellence focused on equity. Part of the shift is because our curriculum allows us to focus on the individual. As I said, it's really holistic, and the work that Lyndsey has done around equity and equality within school and changing people's views and perceptions means that we're really inclusive in our practice, and that's been so valuable to us, which is why we feel that this is something that we really want to celebrate and share, because we think that some of the approaches that we've taken are quite unique, and we've been able to think outside the box with that, of how exactly we can meet the needs of our, not just our disadvantaged, but our pupils on the whole. And the impact has been great. So I'm going to pass over to Lyndsey now, who's going to tell you more about that. There you go.
Okay, hi everybody. I'm just going to start by telling you I am massively out of my comfort zone doing this. I have tried to avoid doing this for my entire 18 years of teaching. I haven't quite worked out whether it's better to do it on Zoom or to do it in front of a group of people, but because I base relationships at the heart of everything I do, I actually think for the first time I would say I think I'd rather be in the same room, but we will take it as it is and go from here. So before I start talking about the provision we put in, I just thought I'd tell you a little bit about myself. So I currently run the SEMH provision at Lancot. So that's provision for 8 children. We currently have 9. They have been at the point of permanent exclusion from their previous settings, and anybody in the, I'm guessing you're all primary, but anybody who knows the paperwork involved in that, you know, these children have significant needs for social, emotional, and mental health. I'm also Deputy Safeguarding Lead, and I oversee the pupil premium at Lancot. I have worked at Lancot for 18 years, and I have 2 daughters, 2 cats, a dog, and a tortoise. And I actually realised when I was doing my notes, I also have a husband, but I did forget about that, so I've just kind of added that in at the end. They are not in order of importance, although they might be. Okay, so I have a massive kind of personal interest in working with disadvantaged and vulnerable people. My mum was raised predominantly by a single parent, and you know, my mum's 67 now, so in those days it was significantly hard. She was one of 7 children. There wasn't really things as social workers around in those days. Well, not to the extent that we know them now, but if they had have been, I think most of the children would have been taken into care. Despite her disadvantage, she managed to retrain at the age of 32 when she was a single parent and go on to be a senior social worker. The thought of her even going to university was never anything that was explored. She didn't even know anybody that kind of went to school, never mind university. So despite her disadvantage, you know, she's gone on to be really successful. And she always says to me that the key to that really, that, you know, despite living in poverty, despite, you know, head lice, despite not having clothes, not having food, her mum was always able to really instill self-esteem and a sense of belief, and that's something that you just can't buy. But actually for some people that is a massive barrier if you don't have that. So I'm very political, I'm very aware of socio-economic issues, and it absolutely has inspired the work that I do and that I continue to do for disadvantaged students at Lancot. So that's a little bit about me. Next one. Okay. So one of the first issues, and I know it came up in one of the chat boxes, somebody talking about perception, you know, and actually staff perception, that absolutely was our starting block at Lancot. We knew that we needed to shift mindset from staff and students, because quite often you would hear, that's not fair, why is he having that, why are they doing that? And quite often, unfortunately, it did come from members of staff. So they would maybe see a child who was getting free school uniform or didn't necessarily have to pay on school trips. And as much as I am completely on board with that and I can empathise, not everybody had that natural empathy. So that was something that we knew we had to work on as a staff CPD. So one of the first things we did, we talked about child poverty. We talked about stats and statistics. We looked at different figures, you know, what that actually means to be a child who's disadvantaged in today's society. And I think that actually in the climate of austerity, particularly over the last 10 years, you know, it's very real. And we needed staff to kind of understand that actually not every child is starting from the same starting block. And actually, if you're coming into school hungry, it's very difficult to learn. It goes back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You know, we need to get these things in order before any actual learning is even going to take place. You know, until a child feels safe, until they feel warm, until, you know, they have a sense of belonging, they're never actually going to reach that really deep level of learning. So that was definitely something that we had to work on. Then we came up with the equality versus equity debate. Again, you know, I have got a picture there for you to look at. A picture speaks 1,000 words. we share this with the children. Actually, the children sometimes get it more than the staff, if I'm honest. But, you know, I think it really does show the difference between equality and equity and how it has to be emphasised. So you can see from equality, that's everybody getting the same, everybody gets exactly the same, and that's really, really fair. But then the notion of equity is that actually you might all get something different, but that then allows the equality. So, you know, you can see equality, all of the people, the children and the dad in the picture, they all have exactly the same, but actually, is that really fair? Are they able to access the same? And then the equity is about giving people what they need so that they can all have the equality. And, you know, I actually have this picture up in my classroom. We talk about it quite often. As you can imagine, particularly in a behaviour unit, it's not fair. Straight away, we go back to the visual and we have those conversations. So because we wanted a whole school approach and understanding, we wanted a very transparent approach. So, you know, what we were delivering to the teachers and LSAs, everybody, you know, in terms of staff, we also wanted the children to have access to that. So it was about a teachable moment. So if the children thought something wasn't fair, it wasn't about parking that notion. It was about actually having those very transparent conversations. You know, it might not seem fair, but actually this is allowing the child to access. One of the activities that we did actually do this in a reception class, and we also did it in a year 6 class. And you might need subtitles when I'm going to say this, but I call them plasters. How would you say it, Jen? Plasters. Yes, plasters. When you cut your finger, you'd put a plaster on. So we bought a box of green plasters just so they were quite vibrant. I asked 4 of the children to come up. We whispered a different ailment that the children would have. So one person had a sore finger, one child had a sore knee, one child had a headache, one child had a tummy ache. But they all got the plaster on their finger because that's fair. That is absolutely fair. You need to all get the same. So the children very quickly realised that, yeah, they all got the same, but it was a bit silly because we weren't meeting the needs of the individual children. And actually, they were able to kind of work that out for themselves. We didn't really need a plenary to discuss it. You know, the penny dropped. And in some point in your teaching career, you have those moments when the penny dropped. And that definitely was one of those moments for me. So that did work in reception, and we do it, you know, all the way up to year 6. This activity is something that I do at least once a year because as much as, you know, you want to embed it with the children, there are times when they do feel a real sense of injustice. So you come back to that activity. If anybody's got other ideas about that, please put it in the chat because it probably will get a bit boring. So any other ideas, please feel free to share. It needs to be as collaborative as possible. So what we've got now, we have a little video, and this is Laura Gill, who taught this session to some year 6 children in lockdown. She's a newly qualified teacher, so you can imagine her absolute despair when I asked if I could iris this so that we could use it. But she, you know, she came along for the ride, which is fantastic. So we're just going to give you a little snapshot of this in action and how we taught it.
What's wrong? Oh, you've broken your leg. How about you? What have you managed to do?
Broken my knee.
Oh, you broke your knee. How did you do that?
I fell off my bike and landed face first somehow.
Oh,
broke my knee.
no. So you landed on your face and still broke your knee. Oh, how about you? What have you managed to do?
Twisted my ankle.
Oh, you twisted. Oh, how about you?
I hit my rainbow.
Oh, that's a nasty one. And yourself?
I broke my arm.
You broke your arm?
My arm is complete dead.
Oh gosh, guys, this sounds really, really painful. We've got quite a few different injuries over here. So I think for your knee, I'm afraid I'm just going to have to give you a plaster, okay? Alright, and what was it you broke again?
My ankle.
Your ankle, okay, well there's a plaster for you to put on your knee as well. How about you? Your leg, okay, well there's a plaster for you to put on your knee. How about you? for your knee. How about you? There we go. So put those plasters on your knees for me, guys, okay? Yeah, you don't have to if you don't want to. You'll sit top now, alright? Okay.
I can't put it on. I can stick it on. Oh, Priya, I'm going to turn it around this Hawaii. Oh, it's a lot better. I think plaster stressful.
So you are feeling really times better. That plaster is helping you out.
Oh, this is really helpful.
Ooh, how about you? Is it helping your funny bone having that on your knee? No.
Yes, it is.
Is that helping your arm with it being on your knee? Oh, okay.
Oh, I'm not trying to help it.
Well, so, I think everybody, the same thing. I've been really careful to make sure I'm fair, and we all have the exact same thing. Is that actually helpful though? Does anybody actually, so you're not feeling any better, are you? That doesn't help your funny bone in the slightest. You're not feeling any better. So what should I have done instead? What should Dr. Gill have done instead? Yes? Yeah, okay. Where is actually hurting, definitely. And some things need to be treated differently, don't they? So unfortunately, somebody might have to have surgery on their broken leg, whereas somebody else might just need a little bit of help for their sore ankle. Okay? And this is where equity comes in. Okay, so this is the thought that everybody gets what they need, whether that might be different to somebody else or not. Okay, so here we have 3 people. Okay, equality says they all get the same and make sure that everything's fair so everybody gets the same. So they've all been given a box to stand on so they can see the match. But this really tall guy could already see the match. And even when standing on a box, this one here still can't see. So equity is saying that this guy doesn't really need a box, he doesn't need it. He was fine with just the 1 box because now he can see, and this person has the 2 boxes. So now they might not all have the same, but they can all see and they can all get involved. Alright, so I want us to have a little think. There's a race, alright, it's just about to start. We've got 1, 2, 3, 6 people lined up ready to win this race. Where should you all start from? Should you all start in the same place?
Okay, I hope you found that a little bit helpful. You know, sometimes it is nice to see how it is done in practice. I'm sure you'll put your own spin on it or not. Yeah, so that's how we taught the equity and the equality to children. And as I said, any other ideas around that, please, please, please feel free to share.
And we saw that, just to jump in, thank you, Lyndsey, was so after the class teacher delivered that in the early years classroom, we started to hear the language and that understanding really come through. So when I was in there one day, I heard a discussion between a group of children who were having snack, and one of the children was saying, well, did you have what breakfast did you have this morning? Because if you've had Cocoa Pops and you've had toast, you don't need 2 apples, but you could have my apple, you know. And they were really not negotiating, but they were showing a great deal of thought into what would be fair for those individuals based on what they'd already had, to make sure that the end outcome was the same. So it just shows how much that does transfer in their own learning and their own thought processes as well. So it is completely accessible to all children.
And this, you know, there's also a link to this and behaviour, and you know, particularly children with sensory needs and things like that. You know, some children don't always feel it's fair that you have a child who has a learning break and maybe might have Lego time, or, you know, iPad time, which is something that they don't have. So it's a really good way of trying to explain that actually these children need that so that they can then access further learning. So again, it just opens up a whole catalogue of discussion, really, which I think is key to everything that we are doing. Okay.
Rebecca, did we have any questions around that before we move on, or are we okay?
Not at the moment. I just wanted to say that you might want to just pop the presentation back onto full screen.
Oh, sorry, my bad. Oh, I was doing so well. Thank you. If you have got any questions throughout, please feel free to put them in the chat box. But there we go, we'll move on.
Okay, so what we needed then was to look at where are we going with our provision for the disadvantaged. We're very keen at Lancot, you know, as I guess you probably all are, that it's not just about the maths and the English. we know that actually for children to thrive, they need a lot more than that in their life, and other things have to be held, you know, in value and, you know, recognised as being of importance. So we had another staff CPD where we talked about what we felt children needed in order to thrive in education. So I'm not sure if you know, but when a child's born, the minute they're born, the midwife will use what they call an APGAR, and that's where they make a very, very quick assumption as to what the child's chances are at thriving in the first year of life. So they look at breathing, colour, cry, reflexes, and they make a real quick kind of in the moment gut instinct decision about those 5 areas, and it does actually tell them a lot. So we decided to kind of come up with our own kind of APGAR. So we're looking at 5 key areas where we think children need to be kind of exploring in order to develop in all areas. You could have 6 areas, you could have 3. Again, this would very much be about your own setting and what you wanted, but we stuck to the 5. So again, we did this, there was a lot of conversation, there was a lot of ideas thrown around, and the 5 key areas that we came up with were maths and English, contribution to school, general knowledge and cultural capital, communication skills, and wider friendship groups. Maths and English is pretty obvious, I guess, and quite often there's a lot of provision kind of thrown at them with boosters, a lot of money thrown at that. Contribution to school, well, I found that one of my biggest kind of barriers whilst working with the disadvantaged was getting them to contribute to school, and whether that be that, you know, after school clubs, sometimes you need parental engagement to get them there, to pick them up. You know, sometimes there's a cost. I would hope, you know, not always, but, you know, at some schools there could possibly be. Maybe about life experiences, you know, going to the theatre, going to the zoo. We have a zoo literally 3 miles away from us, and I am very aware that probably 40% of our pupil premium children haven't even been to the zoo. So it was all these kind of things that we wanted to kind of explore. And wider friendship groups, let's face it, for most people that's really important, especially when you get onto secondary school. So we don't want to just think about the 5 key areas whilst they're at Lancot. It's about, you know, for when they leave us at Lancot.
Which is why we put communication in as well, because knowing the importance of a wide vocabulary and what that does for your kind of self-esteem in future, we thought that was really important.
Absolutely, and these are keys for getting jobs, which again is the ultimate goal at the end. Whatever that job may be, you want every child to have the opportunity to reach their full potential, you know, and, you know, taking children to the theatre, you know, that could inspire them to want to be, you know, an actor or an actress. So, you know, I guess we all know that anyway. So to demolish the attainment gap is what we want to do, but also to prepare them for lifelong learning and employment. So this is where I'm hoping I can explain this without it being too confusing. So this is what we came up with. So you can see, again, we don't have a set mindset on this. Some teachers will actually plot their graph on a piece of paper because it is for the teacher. It's not for me to kind of check that they're doing it. You know, hopefully when people get on board with this, they see the value of it. So there's our areas, the 5 key areas. We think about the term. We talk about what interventions could be put in place, and then at the end we could, you know, kind of reflect on the practice and the intervention and see what the outcome was. I'm going to go into the next slide because it will make more sense, you know, as I talk through. So the APGARs are completed in the autumn term and then updated termly. The adult completing this for the child uses their gut instinct, as I said. So the nearer to the middle of the graph, you just basically plot a dot, and there is an example coming up, so bear with me. You basically plot a dot, and the nearer to the middle of the graph, the more significant the need in that area. So a child who is flourishing in all 5 areas will present with a graph that is square or rectangular in shape when all of the dots are connected. And this is an example, so you can see. So this is one of the children in the provision. So if we just look at the black dots for now, you know, so the middle being, you know, you want to be as far out from the line as possible. So we can see that this child doesn't really have a great contribution to school. Communication definitely could be better. Wider friendship groups is almost non-existent, and general knowledge isn't too bad, but we want them all out towards the end of the line, really. And again, you're only kind of assessing the child against themselves. This isn't, you know, it's not brain science really, it's just a gut instinct, and you want to move them on. So from this, we were able to look at this child, and I could say, you know, he doesn't really have any contribution to school. We know that when children have a contribution to school, it massively impacts on the self-esteem. It gives them a sense of affiliation, a sense of belonging. So that's really, really important. So one of the things that we came up with for this child was to try and encourage them to be part of the school bank, give them a role, give them a purpose, make them feel valued. You know, we almost can't function without them, kind of thing. But I think it's really important at this point to say it has to be real. You know, it's not about, so when we get children to apply for a job in school, in my provision, we've actually just done that this week. It's about upping the level. So we don't bring the level down to being quite low. It's about training them up to fill in an application form really, really well. So it's about, you know, not just giving them a job because they're disadvantaged or pupil premium. You know, they have to feel that they really deserve this. So again, when we do our application forms for any jobs in school, that would always be done in school. It is actually a taught session so that you're teaching, you know, the skills needed. And then obviously if we had a few children that were equally as good, but you know, you really felt that this child needed that role, then they would definitely be trumped. But that's the equity again coming into play. Poor communication skills. So how do we improve this child's, you know, communication? Again, that's linked. If they have a job, if they work in the school bank, hopefully that will have a knock-on effect on their communication skills. They may be interacting with more adults, they may be gaining confidence. Pre-teaching vocabulary, that was one of the things that we did for this child, because we felt that actually his general knowledge wasn't too bad, but we know that actually perhaps if he was more confident in, you know, technical vocabulary, that would really help his contribution to school, and it would also help interaction with friends. And yeah, so general knowledge, this child's general knowledge wasn't too bad, but what we did feel was that there has to be other opportunities, exposure to different experiences. So this child actually went to see Alice in Wonderland at the Royal Opera House in London. That was great. I loved it because we rocked up there. There was quite posh people, and our children absolutely felt that they had every right to be there. We did have a few children that fell asleep, I'm not going to lie. But it's also quite cool to say you fell asleep at the Royal Opera House. So, you know, there's different ways of looking at this. But just the fact that they experienced that, you know, and it's not for everybody. They could have an absolute distaste for opera for the rest of their life, or they could have an absolute love of it. So again, that's how we use our rap cards.
And we did, when Lyndsey first brought it to us and we talked about how we were going to introduce it, we did wonder whether we should kind of put a scale on the graph and things to try and give some sort of consistency to judgment and things. But actually, because the whole point of this is that it's a whole school approach and it is based on gut instinct, we decided not to scale it, but instead make sure that all of the adults around that child are involved. So it was done through phase meetings where all of the teaching assistants and teachers could work together, so they really felt like they'd left with a full understanding of where that child was and where we wanted them to progress to make sure that they had that kind of larger rectangle shape by the end of it. But we even before coming to that point, as a whole school, we talked about what those 5 points, as Lyndsey said, it's very bespoke to us. Those are the areas that we feel that we value, and those are the areas that come across as part of our character education and our creative curriculum that we really value. So right from the very beginning, it was a whole school approach for every child, not just your disadvantaged children. It was for everybody.
And it's also important to say here, you know, it's all about teacher perception. Let's face it, we get that all of the time when we're doing levels, you know. So if I do this for the children in my provision, it's my judgment about that child against that child, if you like. So if you look, you couldn't really compare other children's APGARs because, you know, there's not a specific number. So for general knowledge, it's not a 5 or a 6 because different teachers will have different perceptions about what that means. But it's about you knowing the child and actually you know if they've moved on and how much they've moved on. And also, you know, we don't want to drown people in any more paperwork because what happens is it goes in a file, you feel really organised and you might put it in a cupboard. This is a working document for the teacher to inform provision and actually to be reflective of how that works. Not every provision does work. We know that. Sometimes we think, oh God, that really didn't work. What can we try? But it's a really good starting point for the professional dialogue that we want to have around these children, well, all children, but particularly our disadvantaged. Mm-hmm. So when you look at this, the red dot, I'm a very visual person and I love colour, so mine's are all luminous colours. It's quite funny to look at them, really. But you can see we've got the red dot. So all that tells me is that actually, yeah, this child, when I've come to the spring term, definitely has moved on, you know, in these areas. And then I would just write a little note. Responsibilities worked well, so think of a new job, maybe keep them in the role they're at. There's lots of different ways that you can do this and lots of different provision that you can provide. But again, this is just how we kind of track it.
And I think from that starting point where we involved everybody in it, that was a massive way of kind of changing that perception and adding real value to it, so that the rest of the team, it wasn't something that we were doing to them or asking of them. It's something that they were excited to be able to do, to see the impact of that.
And I think it's about the conversation that this drives. You know, we all know that it's the having the time for those conversations that probably has the most impact. And again, it's a really good tool to take to a pupil progress meeting so that we're all, you know, you're having the conversation, sharing ideas. So from the APGAR, we then have a provision menu. And yeah, so this is given to teachers really because we felt that sometimes children weren't necessarily getting provision for, you know, the different areas. But it wasn't that teachers didn't want to give them that provision. I think sometimes you're just not actually aware of what's out there. So because, you know, I work in SEMH, I'm quite knowledgeable, well, sometimes, as to what's available, what's out there, but not everybody knows what I know. So we decided to just kind of put it in one central place. It is a working document, so it is added to and things are taken off. I have to say it will change during COVID, which is really sad because there's some things that at the moment we just can't do for different reasons. But this is how it should look, you know, when we get out of COVID. And it's just different ideas. So for SEMH, for communication, for contribution to school, there's just a different kind of list of ideas so that you're not kind of stuck thinking, well, this child needs to improve contribution to school, but how does that look? It's really just to add ideas to that, really. It is regularly updated. I do rely on different people, you know, sharing their ideas so that we can update it. So the things, go on, Jem.
So I was just going to say, this is also worth saying. We've put this picture on here, but this is only page 1 of 3 of the menu. So as Lyndsey said, for once they've done their APGAR and they can see where those kind of areas of need are, to be able to, so last year, for example, where we had 2 NQTs in the same year group, to be able to give them, to have that APGAR where it was a team approach, and then say, right, now have a look at your intervention menu, because this is going to map out the provision that you give to this child this term. You know, if they've got gaps in their social skills, what can you put in place? What of these things on this menu are going to cater for those gaps in their social skills? And it means that they don't have to rely on just themselves to come up with those ideas. It's literally there for them. So they say, okay, well, I'll try the social construction group and I'll try the talk time, and we'll see how that goes. And it's the same with any other kind of intervention that you put in place. You put it in place, you monitor it, and you measure the impact, and then you go back to the menu and back to the APGAR. So that's sort of,
and I think what's really good about this, actually, you know, not all intervention has to cost money, you know, and I think there's lots of things happening in the classrooms all of the time. I had a conversation with Miss Gill, actually, she's almost famous after this presentation. We had a conversation because she'd done something for a child. You know, it was in the morning. She specifically wanted to speak to that child because she knew he came in kind of really distressed, but it was internal. So she gave him that talk time every morning, and straight away I said to her, oh my God, that is an amazing provision. Make sure that's on his app guard, because it's not about, you know, accountability, but I think it's a really good way of showing what you are actually providing for the children, because I think a lot can go unnoticed. And I think I would say 99% of people who are working in this role are doing their absolute best to support the children. And I think sometimes a lot of what we do isn't kind of tracked, and it's a shame because you can lose a lot of the provision that you're doing.
Yeah, it's about looking at the bigger things than the smaller things. So, you know, particularly with COVID at the minute, we're all having that discussion around, well, how are we going to give these particular interventions when we can't mix class bubbles? We've only got so many members of staff, we haven't got the space, we haven't got the time. Whereas actually going back to this and saying, okay, right, well, actually the gap's here, so a reflection journal will meet that to an extent. So let's start with that. It's something that we can provide in this moment, and it's something that has had an impact in the past. So it doesn't have to be something big in addition to their kind of routines. It can be, and having a menu like this mapped out, just it gives a really helpful prompt.
And again, if anybody would feel free to share, you know, I'm really needing COVID provision ideas, because that is one area where I am finding quite a challenge at the moment, because a lot of what we had in place we can do, and it's again changing our mindset on how to do it. But for example, we had a pupil premium homework club that ran. I did that every week. It was a lovely opportunity for me to kind of get to know the children, but also another opportunity, you know, for them to meet as well. A weekly library visit, that was something that we had set up where our year 5s and 6 for this term were supposed to be going to the library every week, because we felt that actually we want to promote lifelong learning, you know. And when you think about a visit to the library, it's a really good place to study. If you have a chaotic home life, if you don't have access to ICT, if you don't have Wi-Fi, all of those things can be fixed if you're confident in going to a library and using that as a place of study, accessing books. You know, the wealth of opportunity from kind of giving the children the confidence in that area, we felt was massive. But unfortunately, that's on the back burner, which is absolutely devastating for us. But, you know, we will pick it back up again. We have Luton Town Football Club who come in and do interventions with certain children. Trauma-aware training, that again would be something on the provision map, because, you know, we absolutely believe that if people aren't on board, it's because they don't understand. So sometimes, you know, to help a child with their provision, it is about mindset and about staff CPD. So that's always an option on there as well.
Actually, putting this menu together was a really nice thing for us to do, because it for us, it was a point of reflection of, okay, well, you know, it's quite easy for us to feel that we're not doing enough, because that's what we do as teachers. We always, you know, think to ourselves, am I doing enough for that pupil? But to actually have that conversation where we are listing everything that we are offering, you can walk away from that feeling quite pleased about the role that you're doing.
Could I just jump in really quickly, sorry guys, and just say a couple of people have said in the chat, would it be possible to get a copy of the intervention menu afterwards?
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh yeah, I don't really know that it's at that level, but I'd certainly ping it across. Oh my goodness. Yeah,
that's fine, we can do it with pleasure. But yeah, it's really useful then, because, well, I'll let you carry on, Lyndsey.
Yeah, and again, and I'm going to be honest, this isn't what I do in my provision, but different teachers have different approaches. We have some members of staff that like to type it out and like to have this, and that's fab. For me, it's about the conversation. I make notes and then I can talk through it. So again, it depends on how you work, how you want to record it. But you can see that in the autumn term, the intervention that was put in, and then the outcome. So we've got levels of engagement have increased. So this is somebody in the unit, because what we wanted was to improve their on task time and just basically trying to learn, and that helped. So you can just see how you can go with it really. In the summer term, there were a school banker. Now this child absolutely, you know, it would have been a massive struggle in the autumn term for him to kind of apply for that role, but by the summer term he absolutely was ready, and we could see that there was confidence in maths improving, attendance improved definitely, because they felt that they wanted to come in and have that role, because we can actually sack isn't the right word, but you know, if you have a responsibility, you know, you have to live up to that. So again, like I said, I did this for the purpose of the training really. I wouldn't do that, but I would kind of make notes around the same kind of things on there.
It's just making it a real life process.
Yeah, okay, so now, so the information that we get from our APGAR is then put onto what we call our Acceler8 board. This is a board in the staff room, which I will show you on the next slide. And that's where we have a picture of every child that we feel needs to be on there really. So it's children from our pupil premium list. We also have school defined pupil premium children. That was very much about me, because again, everything we do is about relationships. It's also about me knowing the children. I didn't just want to know that it, you know, work from a list. Again, different schools have different amounts of children. So at the moment we have 53 children who are pupil premium. I would imagine if you have 158 children, this would be more challenging. But again, you know, this is just what we did. We have a picture of every child on a board in a staff room, so that I can absolutely, you know, recognise who they are, get to know them. And we then track any intervention that's happened. So that's not down for me to do as the lead. It's kind of for the class teacher, for the reception staff. So Mrs. Lynham, who works in her office, if she knows that a child's accessed an after school club, she will just write after school club around that child's picture. And we do it so that we can see that no child has been missed. But again, it's also tracking all of the interventions that are happening, not just maths and English. You know, maths and English provision is probably quite easy to track, to talk around, and this just helps. But it's also a really good way to have conversations in the staff room. Now, don't get me wrong, we do not go into that staff room and talk about this board every time we're in there, because we absolutely don't. You know, we do have fun and talk about other things, but you know, quite often you will be at the photocopier and a conversation about a child on that board will crop up, and it's just also nice to look at them, if I'm honest.
That's something we talked about quite a lot as to where we were. So can I show you the board?
Yes, that would help.
So this is our Acceler8 board, and yeah, we did talk at length about where we were going to put it, because obviously we didn't want any children to feel necessarily singled out, so it needed to be somewhere where it was just for staff to access, and we didn't want it so that staff would feel like they didn't have a space where they could go to have a rest and relax. But ultimately we are a school and we are a provision for children, and actually what we've noticed by having this in the staff room is it leads to really purposeful conversations. It means that our pupil progress discussions and our provision discussions don't just happen in pupil progress meetings. They're happening all the time, and the thoughts about and that sharing of good practice between us as a staff team, as well, you know, I've just done this for this pupil, have you tried that? You know, I can see that he's got a gap here. It means that this is at the forefront of all of our thinking, and it's kind of leading our practice, which is why we're seeing such an impact in the progress of these children.
Another thing it's quite good for is I don't really like confrontation, so it's very easy to see if a child, or it looks like a child hasn't had any provision for the term. So it makes it a bit easier for me to kind of say, oh God, you best update that, because it looks like they've not had any. So you know, it's really obvious then if a child hasn't had any provision. And I am quite competitive, so I do like to have my boards filled with the children in my class. So it can add a bit of healthy competition, but actually we are accountable for what provisions put in place, but it does make those conversations a little bit easier. And you know, I'm not saying it's there to humiliate staff, that isn't what I mean at all, but it is just a gentle reminder that actually all children need provision, particularly our most disadvantaged.
And it does bring everything back to that idea of equality and equity. And yes, there are children with significantly more provision. As you can see, there's a lot more post-its on some pictures than others, but that's again because that pupil needs that, and so it definitely feeds into that ethos that we've developed as a staff team, and having that visual there really helps.
And there was one conversation as well, this was quite a long time ago, but you know, okay, so that child might have had a trip to the opera, but this child gets maths intervention every morning. You know, you can see that actually it's just different provision. Every child is getting a lot of provision, but just very, very different. Any questions?
Any questions, Rebecca, before we move on?
I don't think so. I think we had a couple of people asking for a copy of the intervention menu, and someone's just posted in that the SEND Gateway have a great SEND post-COVID review document.
Oh, thank you. Can we write that down? Sorry, can you say that again, please?
So the SEND Gateway have a great SEND post-COVID review document.
Thank you very much. Okay, so this takes us on to aspirations. Okay, so this is where we're on our journey now. So we know that children from disadvantaged backgrounds quite often don't have very high aspirations, you know, and as Karl Marx said, I did say I was political, environment quite often determines consciousness, and I think, you know, that's absolutely true. You know, depending on the environment that you're in, it can depend on, you know, what you want out of life. You know, it can work both ways. So where we started this time last year, thinking we want to inspire children, we want to have them to have great aspirations and all of that, but how on earth do you measure that? How do we know that we're having any impact on a child's aspirations? And what we also have to remember is that more than a third of children base their early career assumptions or aspirations solely on the people that they know. So again, this is fitting into environment determines consciousness. So actually, when I think about my own children, I won't talk too much about the tortoise, the cats and the dog, but when I think about my own children, I'm very aware that, you know, we have a real variety of friends that, you know, we've got teachers or maybe somebody that works in Morrison's, or, you know, the list goes on, and they have regular contact with these people, or did, I should say. So already they're at a massive advantage to some of the children that maybe just wouldn't have those people daily in their lives. And I think we can't presume anything when it comes to, you know, interactions with people. And it's also very likely that children from disadvantaged backgrounds will not have the same opportunities to meet people from a range of jobs. So this all means that children's horizons are already very, very narrowed from a very early age. And actually, that's something that we can really tap into in education. So what we're going to talk about now, is it this one, Jen? Yeah. Is raising aspirations. So again, this is just what I talked about. You know, it's about a third of children not having, and the DFA actually said in its 2015 statutory guidance that modern careers guidance is about much more, it's about inspiration and aspiration as much as it is about advice. So it's about inspiring the next kind of workforce. So what do we do? So this is what we do. This is what we've thought about. I don't know if anybody knows about this. So I stumbled across this about 2 years ago, and it's Drawing the Future. And it's really interesting because I think I'm going to go straight on to the next slide, actually. So this is the document that kind of made me think about what we were going to do. Okay, so basically what the children have is they have 4 grids, and it's draw your favourite subject in school, draw the job you want to do when you're older, draw how you know about this job, and then draw your future. So I trialled this last year because I wouldn't ask staff to do something unless I really believed in it. So I did it last year with the children in the unit. And then I thought, I'm going to do it a year later and see if anything has changed. You know, are they inspired to be anything else? You know, do they want to do, you know, if we've had people into school, has that changed their kind of mindset about what they want to do? So you can see that this child, this is a child with SEND. He had very little engagement and very challenging behaviour, very difficult to engage. So when we did this September last year, he wanted to be a policeman. Unfortunately, there was a lot of police involvement in this child's life, so it makes sense that the people he's had in his life has, you know, inspired him in some way to do that role. This is what I did just last week. So you can see that actually this child now really loves PE. I was like, oh my God, that's great. Likes PE. The job that he wanted was to do with computers. Now, apparently Yeet is a really cool name, so I'm just putting it out there. I feel quite cool when I said to my children Yeet. It means catch or drop, so that's something I learned new. And then draw how you know about this job. Now, I'm not gonna lie, this actually brought a tear to my eye because he's put, "Hi, I am Liam, the IT man." Now, Liam actually comes into school. How often is he in school?
Twice a week.
He comes in twice a week. And actually, I haven't shared this with Liam yet, but Liam has inspired this boy to do his job. So already in a year that, you know, I'm not going to say that this is what he's going to go on to do, but already he's had his horizons widened. And actually, I think this talks about the impact of self-esteem because he actually believes that he can be Liam. And I think that's just incredible. And then draw his future. So again, his future is to do with IT. And I think it's really good about, you know, if we're talking about kind of careers and things like that, it's about linking their subject to jobs. So it's about making them realise that it is purposeful. I don't know how I could get PE into ICT, but, you know, that's something that, again, share in the chat. But again, it's about the conversations with the children. And what I want to eventually see is this child, you know, so I'll do it again this time next year and then the year after. And I just think that's quite a nice way of seeing if he is more aspirational. I just hope that makes sense. But that's kind of our way of thinking. And I just think it would be lovely when they leave us to kind of take them with them. I just think it's a really nice journey of their aspiration, really.
And as Lyndsey said, this is an example from a pupil within Lyndsey's unit. But again, this is something that the whole school can benefit from because it gives you that kind of qualitative measure of the impact of our, not just our APGARs that we do and the provision that follows on from that, but our entire curriculum approach. You know, we talked about how our curriculum design is all around purpose and exposure to the wider world and that experiential learning, and this does contribute and give us that measure of that impact of our curriculum design. So it's been really, really valuable for us.
And I've got another one again. So draw your future. So again, maths was this child. This was September last year. He then wants to be a game designer. He knows about it through playing games. And this is interesting. So again, that he wants a son. He didn't know if he wanted a wife or this other boy because he was, you know, he had quite mixed feelings. Again, that was a lovely conversation. And then I did it again this year. And what's really interesting is, again, it's still maths. So if I'm going to get people in, I'm going to have a real focus for him to really engage him, you know, the careers that maybe are linked to maths. We have been learning about space, and we've been doing a whole topic on the ladies from the Hidden Figures. I don't know if you've seen that film. So actually what I found really amazing, so how does he know about this job? So he's put school hidden figures in the moon landing, and it's really ignited a passion about discrimination and racism and all of that and prejudice. But he's put for his future, he wants to have a whole new civilization on the moon. And I think this is a child that probably will actually. But it just shows that actually, you know, all of these kind of connections with people really do inspire them. And I think this is now linked to what we are doing with our primary futures. So we are trying to get as many people from different employment into school to inspire our children. This is a free voluntary database that you can connect with. Now it's going to be also virtual meetings, but last week I know there was the year 6 class had somebody from Parliament, so we might have inspired the next Prime Minister, hopefully.
Well, we have, because following that meeting, one of the year 6 pupils turned up at my door the next day and said, we need to have a debate club again. You know, we need to start that again, because he wants to be in Parliament, and he knows that actually that sort of communication is necessary for him, and that confidence building within that. So it does inspire. I mean, just through what Lyndsey was saying about this little man's kind of aspirations, by seeing this and saying, oh, okay, right, so you'd like a whole new civilization on the moon, brilliant. What skills are you going to need in order to make that happen? You know, are you going to be the science behind it? Are you going to be the maths behind it? Are you going to be the engineer? Are you going to be, you know, it's broadening their understanding of, okay, so you want to get to here, how are we going to help you get there, and how are you going to help you get there? And exposing him to what that means, which is what we do through
definitely. And it's linking the learning to a potential job, you know. I mean, I know they're all very young, but it's about just opening the horizons, which I think, you know, is something we can all do, and that's free, you know, that doesn't actually cost anything. But I think when it comes to kind of provision, I think it will have a significant impact. I genuinely do think that.
Are there any questions around that before we move on to the next one?
Nothing in the chat at the moment.
I don't know if this is good or bad.
It's good. We've had someone saying thank you. This is all very useful, so it is good.
Right, good. Okay. So the next thing again. So one of the other things again was.
Sorry, one question has just come up. Sorry, saying how often have you used primary features?
With across all different year groups, very frequently, because as you said, part of our kind of learning journey around that curriculum design is bringing that sort of experience in, regardless of what the kind of theme is that we're teaching to.
And now our head teacher has given us a challenge, and it's 1.5 term, isn't it?
Minimum of
1.5 term, which again, that would depend on how far, you know, you want to do, but we're kind of our 2nd year into it now. So it is 1.5 term.
That's great. We're also getting people saying lots of great ideas. So
thank you. Okay, so then we thought, again, I think this is about kind of personal reasons and different things like that. But you know, with austerity and the way things are, you know, with payday loans, high levels of debt and things like that, we kind of wanted to prepare our children a little bit more for the future as well. And I think, you know, when I was young, the thought of going to a bank was just really scary, because I could straight away see that my mum was getting a bit tense, a bit anxious. It wasn't necessarily a positive experience, anything to do with money, or, you know, and let's face it, when you go into a bank, they're quite formal environments, people are quite serious, and I wanted to make children aware that actually, regardless of where you are in life, you know, you should have that same opportunity to save if you want to. So we wanted to make it really accessible for our children, but we also wanted the children to have ownership of it. So we contacted a lady called Trish. I won't give her full name because she might be inundated after this. And she works for the credit union, which again, we love the principle behind that. Because the credit union is a community bank, so it's not all about profit and things like that. It's a bank that's run by the community for the community. So it took us actually 18 months before we actually launched the bank, but it was just brilliant. So we have the children from year 5 who run the bank. So they had to do a written application, they had to be interviewed. And Trish is a hard taskmaster, you believe, honestly. She did not make it easy for them. And, you know, they come in every Tuesday morning, they have to run the bank, they deal with the money. Again, this is slightly different now, but I'm talking pre-COVID. And it's just amazing, you know, the they need to do confidentiality. You know, in the first week we had somebody running around talking, whoa, he's got loads of money, he's got £3.56 in his bank. So again, there's a lot of life skills that come out of that. You know, the pupil leadership, community involvement, incentives. And I was wanting to be really clear from the beginning that it's not about the value. You know, it doesn't matter how much you can save, but actually you can kind of chip away at it. The children got little piggy banks. If they want, some children will come in every week, some children will come in half term, some children won't actually access it, but again, that's something that we are developing all of the time. And we didn't want it to be it was about making it accessible for them, really. So that's what we kind of come up with, and it's working really well, actually. And we have a lot of our year sixes they're kind of in their third year of it now, and they're saving up. So some are saving up for a residential at the end of the year. Some are saving up. We had one little boy who wanted to save up because he wanted a day experience at the zoo. You know, and you can save for other things, but we also do it for parents. That's another thing we have to make better, really, because we don't have as many parents accessing it as I would like. And then also rolling it out to staff, so having Christmas clubs and things like that, so that, you know, we can all kind of try and be part of the community bank. Yeah, I couldn't think of anything else on that.
No, it's just, it's lovely. I mean, as Lyndsey said, the kind of setup pre-COVID was that it opened, we had one of our classrooms open early once a week. The year fives would arrive early and prepare everything. And then children would have the 40 minutes before school started, where they'd come in with their family.
Your children come in.
Yeah, my children loved it. But they'd have their bank book and they'd have their set amount, and they'd deposit this money, and the bankers would then update their bank book, and they'd store the money safely, give them a little stamp, and things like that. So the children could see the value kind of going up, and have that sort of responsibility on both sides. Has proven really important. It's made a real difference.
Yeah, and I had a child actually who was a school refuser, and he was a looked after child. Unfortunately, he didn't stay with us too long because he did have to go to a therapeutic residential. But the only day he would come in was the day when he worked in the bank. And to be perfectly honest, I know I said about raising the bar and trying to get the children to have really high kind of levels of expectations in terms of filling out application forms. He just actually got the job because he wasn't able to kind of do the interview process, but actually we didn't want him excluded because of that either. And we knew that actually that sense of responsibility would get him into school. Every Tuesday he would come in and be really, really good. Well, until the end of the banking session. But it really kind of started to make him feel quite included and quite important, you know, and it's a lot about honesty and things like that.
And this was a really great kind of starting point for how that's then kind of snowballed and developed across the whole school, because I won't go into too much detail around it now, but as part of our curriculum is self-funding, so the children, as part of their learning themes, they have the visitors in, we did have visits out, but enterprise was very much built into that. So within each theme, the children were responsible for designing some and making some sort of product that they could then sell as part of their enterprise curriculum, which was then sold to parents or the community, and the money would then go back into their class bank account, and it was a proper bank account through credit union, so they could see the money going up, the money going down, whether they were in debt, whether they needed to borrow money from somebody else's bank account, which then they could then charge on that. So it's just adding that sense of purpose within our curriculum.
And that really helped for levels of engagement within the unit, because the children absolutely know that whatever money they kind of could make for the class bank account, they could spend. So one year we had a yearly subscription to We Love Bricks, which is Lego. So you get a new Lego set every month, but then you have to clean it and send it back. So the levels of engagement that year were just through the roof, because they desperately wanted to earn money through a collaborative project, so that we could then get our monthly subscription of We Love Bricks. So again, that was just another way of kind of being really inclusive for all children and giving them ownership really of their curriculum design.
Yeah, and having that understanding of, you know, things don't necessarily come for free. So, you know, we've got to find a way of making the money in order to pay for whatever it is that you want within that strand of that curriculum. So
yeah,
again, it's just adding that sense of purpose and responsibility, which has been really helpful.
So what we've got, we do have questions, but before we go on to questions, I'm just going to put up, I have got a spelling mistake in that, so I do apologise. So useful reading, so we've got the primaryfutures.org, which is the website for the free volunteers that will do it online, so that's always a good word. I've got the Sutton Trust toolkit and research. I find that really interesting. There's loads I could have talked about because they talk about what employers notice and about the percentage of people that go to kind of the high range universities, how many are from disadvantaged families, you know, again, it goes on and on and on. The RADI project, which is really good, and that's for specifically pupil premium leads. They do a lot of research and, you know, talk about how to demolish the gap. And then I found this really interesting, and I didn't want to go too much on this, but again, it's fascinating, and it's the thought about are children on the SEND register because of their disadvantage or because of a SEND need? And I think sometimes that's just a really good thought. And actually, you know, it's the chicken and the egg scenario. So I haven't got all of the answers, but when I think about some of the children in my provision, and we'll never know, but quite often I do have to think, you know, is it because of their disadvantage that they are SEND, or is it SEND? I hope that makes sense. But that's a really good kind of book on that. But it's a brochure, like a, what do you call it? I don't know. I can't think of the word, but it's one of those things. And that's us now. So I hope that's been interesting or useful or whatever.
That's been absolutely brilliant. Thank you both so much. I'll hand over to everyone else if anyone's got any questions or anything they want to add.
Just to say, pre-COVID, we Lyndsey would always have people asking to come in to kind of have a look at the provision, but I did ask Lyndsey's permission before we put it on the first slide. But Lyndsey is contactable through our office email, so if you do have any further questions, always feel free to get in touch, and we're always willing to share.
Or get in touch and we'll just share ideas anyway, you know, a little hub.
We're getting lots of thank you very much and lots of helpful ideas.
Oh, that's nice.
So that's brilliant. I'm going to send around the slides afterwards, so everyone's got a copy of those. And I'm also going to send around a feedback form. So if you could just take a couple of minutes to fill that in for us, that would be really great. And then I can share it with you as well, Lyndsey.
Yeah, the slide that we've actually used is updated to the one that we sent you. So we'll probably have to send you this, if that's okay?
Yep, that's absolutely fine.
When we ping over the provision menu, we'll send the new slides.
Brill. Well, thank you both so much. If we don't have any questions, then we can probably end it there. But again, you should have a look at the chat before you log off, because you've had lots of nice comments. So thank you both.
Thank you.
No, she's amazing. Thank you very much for listening, everybody. I do appreciate
Thank you.
it. Thank you, Rebecca.
Thank you all. Thank you. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.